Well, I live up in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and I have a forest of many different species of tree, which you can see a few of here. Off in the distance there, you see some huge Douglas firs, and there's a grove of giant Douglas firs over in this area. Also have a lot of madrone trees. You can see a madrone in the front here, and behind that is a big black oak. Probably the predominant tree on the property, though, is the tan oak. You can see a fairly large tan oak over here. And I wanted to talk a little bit about a small tan oak that I have on my property that I've been watching for the last 10 years. And if you look at this tan oak right here, it has a trunk diameter, about 10, maybe 12 inches in diameter. And it's been growing for probably 12 to 15 years, and it's been growing quite slowly. Well, the interesting thing about this tan oak, let me back up a little bit. Tan oak, Lithocarpus densifolius, is a species of tree that is not really a true oak. It's in its own family, but it is the species of tree that is most susceptible to the Phytophthora ramorum disease, also referred to as sudden oak death. Some people just say sod. And if you look out in the distance here, you can see way over here there's some tall tan oaks that are showing the first signs of the sudden oak death, and those will probably die off. It'll improve my view, so I'm not too sorry about it, but it does mean that I have to go cut them down. On my property, if you look out over on this side, there are literally thousands of huge tan oaks. Some of them are well over 100 feet tall. Those brightly lit trees in the back there, those are all tall, straight tan oaks. It's a tan oak forest. And one by one, these trees have been succumbing to the sudden oak death. And I first started seeing this happen about 10 years ago when I lost 1 to 2 trees. Then the next year was 3 or 4 trees. And year by year, I think I've lost over 100 trees in the last 10 years. And currently I haven't counted them. I hiked the property, but I would guess that currently there's probably about 50 trees that are dead or dying. Now, let's get back to this tree right here. When this tree was only about 8 feet tall, you can see how some of the leaves on it are totally brown. It started browning over the entirety of the tree, and I said, well, that one's going to go. And this stump down here, this huge stump, was one of the largest tan oaks I've ever seen. It died. The whole thing just turned brown. Sudden oak death took it out. So I had to take the tree down, and in the process, the guys dropped a piece of firewood that rolled down and slammed into the trunk of this tree right here and caused a big wound on it. I didn't think much about it because the tree was destined to be removed anyway because it showed the first signs of the sudden oak death. And then the next year it recovered. And I don't see that very often. I don't see tan oaks that show the symptoms and then come out of it. Now, some people are saying that you can do bark scraping or some sort of damage to the trunk and it has an impact on the tree, and I have nothing to say that that works. But the only thing I can say that is different about this tree than anything else is that it got impacted by a piece of wood. Now, the environment around the root zone of this tree has remained pretty much the same. We've never cleaned up any of the duff underneath, and so it's a fairly natural environment. But I've been watching this tree. In the last couple of years, it's taken off. It's about 25 feet tall now. Unfortunately, it's in a bad spot because I don't want a huge tan oak crowding out this part of my property. So I will probably take it down. But it's been interesting for me to watch it because the upper canopy looks great. There's virtually no signs of dieback. There's a little bit of area where some of the branchlets, the very tips, are starting to brown, and it may succumb to the sudden oak death and turn brown. But right now, it's kind of an anomaly because it looks so much different than all the other trees. And I was asking at a conference. I went to a conference Thursday where some of the top specialists in the world on Phytophthora ramorum were talking about this problem. And I asked the question, I said, are there tan oak trees that are resistant, and can those tan oak trees be bred to create trees that are resistant to the disease? And the answer was not a positive but not a negative either. And he says that there have been some instances much like this one, and they've tried breeding the acorns, but the acorns did not prove to be resistant young trees. So whether it's something that happened to this tree, maybe it was the impact at the base threw the tree into some kind of a self-preservation mode where it had to restore its own vigor, and that was able to overcome the disease. I don't know. This is where I keep my dog. Maybe that's where the dog pees all the time. Maybe it's a nitrogen overdose. I don't know. But for some reason, this tree is hanging in here. I'm reluctant to cut it down because it's kind of a wonder to me, but it's in too tight of an area. And right next to it, you see this madrone, which is a fairly nice tree. And unfortunately, the whole upper canopy has died back. And this, from what I have learned, is from a disease called Botryopharia. And it attacks madrone trees. It's kind of a slow-acting disease, often fatal. And so this tree also needs to come out. Probably should do that before it gets too far gone, because once they die, they're really dangerous to work on. I got my work cut out for me. So anyway, I wanted to share this little story about this tan oak and talk a little bit about the problem that we have. And finally, there are currently hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of dead and dying tan oaks just in the Santa Cruz Mountains. On my property, we have 20 acres. I said we probably have 1,000 trees. I've gone out and done rough counts before, which is really, really hard to do. But I think 1,000 is probably a pretty accurate number. And you can see this whole property in its entirety is full of trees. And if you look up at my madrone grove, here's another madrone grove. This is almost exclusively madrones in here. You'll see a little bit of tip dieback up and through here. And some of that is caused by tent caterpillars. I do have infestations of tent caterpillars that'll move in. And when you have little splotches of dead and dying foliage, sometimes it's caused by insects. So you have to be really careful how you come to conclusions or how you evaluate trees. The black limbs on the madrone, once they turn black, that is generally associated with the Botryopharia disease. Sometimes individual spots of leaves could be insect related. And don't discount squirrels. Sometimes squirrels will chew on the tips of branches and cause them to die back. Well, thanks for watching, and hope you enjoyed this little from my deck brief tour. I'm going to go back and get another cup of coffee.